Is sitting in front of me. Dave Burt is the founder and director of SALT, which is an acronym, but it's also a catchy name, so it's worked well. What is it exactly? He's here to tell you all about it. Welcome, Dave.
Thank you, Richard. Great
SALT
to be here.
is?
It stands for Sport and Life Training, but also we understand that SALT brings out the best. And what it is, it's a not-for-profit health education company where we're looking to go into local AFL clubs, footy clubs, and deliver education in some of the areas that we know we're battling with at the moment in our society. So respect for women, drugs and alcohol, racial vilification. So we help clubs to improve their culture if it needs it, and to develop effective leadership teams, and to really see themselves as having a role outside of just playing footy.
Why just AFL? Why just Aussie rules, rather?
I think because we wanted to get it right in one sport to begin with. So we chose which sport we thought had the most influence in our community. And of course, if you go down to any local footy ground, there's people there from 8 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday till 6 o'clock, and it's where people do community, probably more so than in other sports, but we will branch into other sports in time.
And why are you doing it? What have you ever done?
Well, I was never a great footballer. In fact, I grew up mainly playing cricket, but I was a footy coach and a school teacher for 30 years. And I used to wonder why it was that boys were so fantastic on the field when you were coaching them in footy. So if you asked them to do something for you, they'd do anything for you. If you asked them to come off the field, they'd sprint off the field. And you'd see them on the field being sacrificial, handballing from 20 metres out to the guy who's 10 metres out and putting their body on the line. And then I'd see them go into class and they'd sit in the back row and they'd throw a rubber at the kid in the front row and they'd be rude to the teacher. And I thought, how can they be so good in footy and not so good in anything else when they've got such potential? And I saw sometimes deliverers into footy clubs come in as I watched my son play footy. And I thought, wow, imagine if we had trained teachers who really understood footy and could really bring the best out of what already exists in football as that potential and get them to expand it into other areas.
What do you think that disconnect comes from? That difference between what you can get young men to do on the footy field and what you can get them to do in the class?
Well, I think it's a
Sometimes.
very cultural thing. I think we idolise AFL football, don't we? We love it above everything. And we go into footy clubs and we say to the boys, is there anything more important than AFL footy? And they kind of scratch their heads and look at you and think for a while. And then some of them say, yeah, family. And others say, maybe education, but that's debatable, and work. But actually what we know is, and in my role in the past, I was the chaplain at the Eastern Ranges, they're putting a lot of eggs in the basket that they're going to be professional, paid, loved footballers. And what could be better for them? So I think that's why they hold football in such high esteem.
Why are they two types of people, do you think? Why do they behave differently in two settings?
Because I think football has found a spark that enables them to be their best. It's something about that defining of your manhood, that earning of respect, that ability to show courage. It's everything that's great about a man is exampled when we play a game of footy. And I feel like young men feel like real men when they're playing football. The expectation on them to rise and to protect and do all those things which innately are important to us come out on the footy field, and perhaps at school or other places sometimes they're a bit underwhelmed compared to on that footy field with the adrenaline and the example of others. Something's
going wrong in that, it seems to me, because one of the big functions of sport, there are lots of functions of sport, but for me one of the functions of sport is to gain a knowledge of self.
Absolutely.
The most critical thing you can do for we're talking about young men, but young people, is get a knowledge of self and know thyself. And it comes up in all sorts of ways, in all sorts of literature throughout the thousands of years. So something's disconnecting where young men are finding out about themselves, setting challenges, doing all that, but aren't transferring that into their life. Absolutely. So it's like it stops when they walk off the field. So something's wrong in the teaching. Something's not connecting.
And this is
Do you
why
agree? Not agree?
I totally agree, Richard.
Okay. You
and
can say no. It's all right.
No, because this is why we formed SALT. If they have that potential, why does it stop once they cross the boundary line?
Yeah, what is that? Because they're not learning a life lesson for some reason. They think they're learning a football lesson.
No. So really what we do is we reframe. We don't come in and do drugs and alcohol or these other things and say, well, here's the rules, and if you don't follow them, there's going to be punishments. But we say, look at the potential in you to live successfully on the field with each other, to be interconnected in your decisions and complementary to one another and do these really quite difficult things together. Imagine if you did that with your family. Or imagine if you did that in your work, and what would that get you for a lifetime? Whereas we love footy, but it's a limited lifespan. But imagine if you applied those skills. And this is largely based upon, you might have heard about the positive psychology research and Martin Seligman and identifying what your strengths are. So we go into a footy club and we say, we know you guys have already got courage. You've got the understanding of sacrifice and commitment and teamwork, but you're just applying it in one setting. And that's very much a cultural thing where I think when they go to school, sometimes as footballers, they're expected to kind of be cool and a bit lazy. And
I just think we view sport simplistically, that we view sport traditionally as an activity where you run around and do stuff. And it's separate, it's out there. It's different to your schoolwork or and of course it's not. It's all closely meshed and success is in one aspect, carry over to the other. Danny's saying, what, so I'm not a real man if I don't like football? Danny's saying, because, that's where I think you were saying that the players feel like men, as real men, as they're involved in that sport.
Again, as a school teacher, I used to wonder why it was. When a new kid came to school, if it was a girl and she was deemed to be a pretty girl, she was immediately popular. But when it was a boy, if he was good at sport, but most particularly footy in Melbourne, he seemed to go straight to the top of the social hierarchy at school. So be it right or wrong, and I'm not saying that it is what a real man is, but we, from what I can gather, lift footballers up on a pedestal, and particularly at school, and so they have influence. And that's another reason why we want to do this through footy, because again, there was a recent study at La Trobe University just completed on the impact of football and social impact. And again, what they said was that in the footy club, firstly, the players are 3 times more connected with each other than they are anywhere else. So they're ready to take in what we teach them because they're connected and they see purpose and they're engaged. And secondarily, that for everybody you influence in a footy club, they influence 10 other people in society. So we know that footballers do have influence, and that's another reason why we think it's an effective place to start.
What are the clubs thinking? What sort of clubs are you approaching for this? Is this amateurs,
amateur
old
clubs.
boys sides? I mean, is it all the amateurs? Any range?
We began partnering with the Eastern Football League. So they promoted us to their clubs, and they actually were good enough to subsidise the cost. So we've kept our costs very minimal because, again, in the past there have been companies that have come in, but they've been very expensive. They've used ex-AFL players, and the content has been good, but sometimes they've come and they've gone, and it hasn't lasted particularly. So the Eastern Footy League saw that we weren't trying to maximise our profits, that we had trained teachers who'd played footy and cared. So they said, if you do one of these units with Salt, we'll pay half of the cost of that, which made it really cheap for the club. Now we've got the Northern Footy League and the Southern Footy League also taking us into partnership, and the Yarra Junior Football League, and we'll be looking to expand that as we can train more teachers. What
sort of experiences have you had with this? What's this like? What's going on?
Well, it's actually really compelling. We stand in front of a group of footballers, and sometimes I think, who am I to ask these really personal questions? But I'll say things to them like, tell me about drugs in school, and the boys will open up and they'll tell a whole lot of stories about the drugs that they've seen at school. And I'll say, do you do anything about it? And they'll say no. And I say, why not? And they say, too scared, don't care. And so, what about the footy club? And immediately they'll say, we won't allow them in here. And I say, why not? And they say, because this is family. And that's the way they talk. I'll say to a fella, tell me about drugs in your space. Again, I feel like I'm kind of being rude, but I ask them, do you think I'm being rude? And they say, no, these are the questions that need to be asked. So I ask one fella at a club and he goes, I've been addicted to ice for 3 years and I've been clean for 1. And on a Friday and Saturday night, the hardest thing I ever do is keep away from my old friends, because if I'm with them, they'll lead me back down that track. And I'll say, how many people actually knew that? And no one in the room knew. Nobody had ever asked him. And so I said, well, what are we going to do? And one guy says immediately, we're going to get around you. You're going to come out with us on a Friday night and we're going to protect you. And the president said, I'd known him for years, but I never knew that was going on in his life.
Why are clubs doing this? Why are they? I mean, aren't they just going to open up a can of worms that they're not capable of dealing with? No. They're a club official. They run a footy club.
I mean,
how are they going to be able to help people who are in, stressful situations or dealing with addiction or whatever else that gets uncovered in these conversations?
From a purely commercial view, and I wouldn't be cynical enough to say that that's the reason why they do it, but from a commercial point of view, if your family is seen to, if your club is seen to be protective and giving education as well as just footy, then people are going to send their kids to your clubs. It does give you a competitive advantage. But actually, as you speak to the presidents of footy clubs, they really do care. This is their family, it's their world, it's their community, and they want their kids to be safe, and they realise that Perhaps in the past, footy clubs took boys down a road that involved negative risk-taking. But back in the day, maybe they drank till midnight, maybe they drove home. But it wasn't the same as it is today. And now they do. They fear ice and they fear some of the greater perils that are out there now. And they realise that as role models, they do have a role to play. But it's not about digging up something that they can't deal with, because again, what we say to them, it's not your job to deal with it. It's your job to be a community of care, to make sure that somebody gets around that guy, that he does go out with you on a Friday night, and we can refer. There's plenty of fantastic referral agencies. So we're trying to partner with Beyond Blue, with White Ribbon and a number of different organisations so that, again, we give out their handouts and leaflets. If you've got an issue, this is the number that you ring.
Dave Burt, who you're chatting to, founder and director of SALT, a passionate believer in it because, well, he has to be. It's getting up and going, and if he doesn't believe in it, he'll never convince anyone else. Sportandlifetraining.com.au is the website. You can go there to find out more. Dave's PE teacher, also school chaplain for over 30 years. Is there a religious element to SALT?
No, I happen to be a Christian, and many of our deliverers are. And we want people who've got a passion for people, but there's nothing overtly religious or Christian about what we do.
I'm sure that comes up a lot. How do you measure any success in SALT? What are your KPIs? How do you, I don't know, you're in there for a year. How do you measure anything's happened?
The beautiful thing when I spoke at the Northern Footy League lunch was that I sat down next to Professor Russell Hoy, who actually wrote that study from La Trobe University, and I said, we need a study now that will show what difference we're actually making now. We're pretty new, but the feedback that we're getting is, A, this is better than anything we've ever had before. B, we can already see the difference in the way people are talking. Our research tells us that it's no good to come in and just do education. We actually have to leave something within the club, within their structures, that keeps these conversations going. So setting up small committees within the club that actually oversees a mentoring program, that oversees an education ongoing program with the club, and make sure that, say, the core values that we establish in their club get repeated over and over so that they become naturally spoken about by everybody within the organisation.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm pausing there to reflect on what you said. I wondered too if you'll get any feedback from the wider community. I wonder if family or schools will see any difference.
Well, I think what clubs should notice initially is that a parent says, we wanted to put our boy into your club because we heard about the things you were doing off the field, not necessarily on the field. And I think it's really interesting when you reflect upon what Alistair Clarkson says after they won that premiership. And he says, the thing I was most proud of in our boys was their resilience, their humility and their humanity. So here we are talking about these attributes that happen off the field, knowing that there's going to be a flow on the field, but actually footy clubs are about far more than winning premierships. I'll give you an example. We go into clubs sometimes and we say, I want you to order the following things in importance. Number 1, winning premierships. Number 2, becoming the best player you can be. Number 3, creating a safe and happy environment for your mates. And number 4, leaving a legacy for the future. And what they tend to do is put everything in a different order, but they always leave number 4 as last. And then we challenge them and say, if you can put number 4 first, 3, 2, 1, you might not win more premierships, but you're probably going to be more likely to. You can't control that. But actually what you're going to do is create a wonderful community that people are going to want to be a part of. And they nod their heads and they get it because they do realise...
Really? Don't they go, mate, I'm trying to win a premiership?
Let me tell you a funny story.
I'm 18, I'm 19. I don't think about super. I don't think about buying a house. I certainly don't think about legacies.
No, you're right. And that's something that we've got to try and instill in them over a period of time. But ask anybody who's got a kid. So there's a 28 or a 30-year-old in the club. And they'll go, I started to think differently once I had kids. But I'll talk to them about what David Parkin talks about, you know, in his post-footy life, what Neil Danaher is doing as he faces his own mortality. He's trying to leave a legacy. And they do start to get it because we understand that for men, the most important thing that they really want is respect. And we know also that during that time of their 20s, it is about themselves and it's about setting up their lives. And it's not being selfish to focus on yourself, but to have the perspective that it's not just about yourself, to have empathy and to be given the respect to mentor a young boy and his best interests. That's something that is compelling even to guys in their 20s.
Fascinating, Dave. Thank you so much. SALT is the organisation, sportandlifetraining.com.au. You can find out more by going to the website. It is a not-for-profit health promotion charity delivering education, culture and leadership training into local footy clubs is the model, hopefully to spread elsewhere. Not particularly religious based, you're saying, although a lot of your what did you call them, deliverers?
Yeah, teachers. They're mainly school teachers.
A lot of teachers happen to be Christians. Is there any link to that? Is there any reason that they happen to be? Or
I think that's how we all met each other to begin with, and we were talking 10 years ago about how could we do this really well? How could we live our faith out in a way that made a real difference in something that's attracting people, because church is not attracting people, but sporting clubs are. So how could we be real out in the community and make a difference?
And how many are in SALT? I should have said that. How many are in the organisation? How many teachers?
Well, we've got 10 teachers currently training, and yet we're starting to appoint what we're calling regional managers.
I guess that's what I'm saying, that we're not talking about an organisation of thousands.
Oh,
this is
no.
you and some of the people you know and trust
Officially,
who are
we've
in some simpatico getting together. So it's no surprise you all come from the same area, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's right. And as we expand, we'll probably become more diverse. And we're hoping by 2018 to have state coordinators and regional managers all over Australia. That's our aim, and we've got a pretty switched-on board who are looking for ways to make that happen.
What Dave's telling you about is the start of an organisation. It's not quite embryonic. I'd say baby steps we're at, wouldn't you? So,
well, 26 clubs we did in our pilot season, 47 presentations. So most clubs have more than one presentation.
Yeah. So you're underway.
Yeah.
But it's early days. It's
And
very
learning
exciting.
as we go. Oh,
And
we're
learning
loving
as
it.
you go. Sportandlifetraining.com.au. Dave, thank you so much. 774 ABC Melbourne.
Hi there, it's Raph Epstein. You can hear me on 774 ABC Melbourne, weekdays from 3 till 6 p.m. But with ABC Radio online and on mobile, you can hear me anytime you like. And you can hear me anywhere you like as well. Catch an interview at work, follow a breaking story on the tram, and listen to changing tracks in the park. It's up to you. Hear now, hear later, hear anywhere. ABC Radio online and on mobile.
On 774 ABC Melbourne.
You're with Richard Stubbs. Call now on 1300 222 774.
Or SMS 0437 774 774.
24 to 2, we've just been chatting with Dave Burt, who's hung around he is the founder and director of SALT, which is an organisation, sportandlifetraining.com.au, that goes into footy clubs, because it's his contention, I think I got it, Dave, that's where you find young men. That's the area that the people who are in those clubs tend to put their efforts and thoughts and focus into those clubs. That's the place you can affect people in their lives. Is that a sort of summary?
We think that's where they're most connected and most motivated, is when they're playing footy.
1300 222 774, or you can SMS 0437 774 774. Do you think the local footy club is the best place to start these conversations? Will that work? Does this make sense to you? By the time they get to play footy in their local club, is it too late?
Well, not if we start when they're in under 13s. And again, that's part of the model that we're looking for, is to start when they're still young and innocent and idealistic, and we ask them, have you ever seen any drugs? And they say no. And we can, at that stage, hopefully build within them a conviction that they'll never use drugs.
Deb's in Armidale. Hi, Deb. What did you want to chime in with?
Hi, Richard.
How you doing? What did you want to add
Well,
to this
thank you.
conversation?
I just wanted to touch again on the comments that somebody did send something through by text, and reaction to your speakers saying that real men play football, and therefore, there is that gender stereotype that I'm hearing in this section that you've got with your person you're interviewing. And I think it is a little bit. I do think that they've got the best of intentions, but those gender stereotypes, particularly with males, assuming they have to be, I think your speaker did say what a man is, what a real man is. Those kinds of phrases are really dangerous, and there's been a lot of research done saying that those kinds of things are really one of the biggest causes of family violence that we are experiencing in plague proportions at the moment. And I work in the sector. And
why are they dangerous? And just expand a little bit there, Deb. Why are they dangerous? Why are they a cause?
Because I think when men are living under these expectations that if they're, for example, not playing football or not being good at football or not being courageous or some of the other things that were discussed earlier, then they're not a man or a real man. That's often something that then causes them conflict at home. That power and control is something that they need to assert over their partner and other people because of the frustration they're not meeting this expectation that society is putting upon them.
I won't put words in Dave's mouth, but I don't think that's exactly what he said. I think what he was referring to, or what I understood anyway, is that he was referring to the young men who play football, and he sees a different personality in the way they conduct themselves on the field to the way they behave in a
Yeah.
classroom. So he wasn't saying real men do this. He was saying he looks at that group over 30 years' experience and feels that that's what they're thinking, and that you can use that.
I do understand that, but he did actually use that phrase, that's what real men do. You could probably go check back on it. And it's just
Dave?
a dangerous
No,
little
Dave's still sitting
assumption.
here. What do you think, Dave?
Yeah.
No, I'm glad,
Deb's
Deb,
making an interesting
because
point.
if I've made a point unclearly, then thanks for giving me the opportunity to clarify that we actually do a unit on respect for women, and really what it's about is what does it mean to be human. So not what does it mean to be a real man, but certainly that no men ever take out their anger or frustration on women. So we talk about the fact that men and women have certain differences, but that we're equal, and that's the way we need to view. We certainly in footy clubs come up against traditional stereotypes that we have to deal with, but actually that's what we're gently trying to do within the context of the footy club itself.
It sort of makes sense to me, Dale. I hear what you're saying. But what do you think? Does it make sense to go to the source, to go to a place where lots of young men are gathering and try to affect change there? That prima facie seems to make a certain sense to me.
It does. Is that to me, Richard?
Yeah.
No, it does make sense. I think it was probably more in the context of this interview, just the power of language, and just even if it's just a sentence here, a sentence there, just saying something like, as your other person texted in saying, am I not a real man? So he also picked up that. So I just think if we're really careful with our language, and then we're not putting out to the general community that certain men should be doing certain things, then I think then we'll all be able to move forward in a really positive way.
Hey, what's the area you work in, Deb? You said that you worked in this area?
Well, it's not just family violence, but predominantly, and homelessness, which stems from that. So
Have you been doing it for a while?
Yeah, I have, and we provide all sorts of different information referrals for women who are needing it, because it's such a difficult area to navigate for them, and they're usually not in a place to be able to think for themselves.
Yeah, we've done lots of conversations about that over the
Yeah.
past. The reason I'm asking that question is just because I've got you there, and anecdotally, I don't know over what period you've been working in this area, have you seen a change? Because you mentioned like there was an epidemic, and I wondered at your grassroots aspect if you've seen a change. Are the numbers increasing, or what have you seen?
It seems that they are. So we don't know if that's an increase in reporting, or there are other theories as to why it's increasing, and that could possibly be a bit of a backlash to all the publicity that area is now being given, which has actually resulted in higher incidents, which is a real shame. Yeah. Either way, it's plague proportion, and if any women need help, they can call the Wire organisation in West Melbourne, and they'll help them out.
Deb, thank you, and thanks so much for calling up. That was great. Dave, thank you too. It's really interesting. You're getting into an area that can trigger all sorts of responses. One word wrong, one aspect wrong. It's in a fascinating area you work in. You've got to be on your guard, and not so much on your guard, but have your awareness out the whole time. And I often think with young men, you're almost diffusing a bomb. You need to reprogram them in some circumstances and set them right.
Well, that's it. And so 2 weeks ago, I actually travelled up to Sydney to meet with White Ribbon and to say, here's our course, go through it, and you're the experts in this. What we, I guess, classify ourselves as experts in is footy club culture and the way young men think. We've seen that for years and years, and we've grown up in it, all of us who deliver. But certainly we're looking to the experts in the other spaces at Beyond Blue and White Ribbon to say, have we got our language right, and are we at the cutting edge in the way that we're delivering this? So we're happy to get any kind of feedback along the way. In fact, every time we deliver, we ask for feedback from the clubs as to whether it could be done better. Fascinating.
It's got to be early days and shaping. Sportandlifetraining.com.au is the website. Dave Burt, thank you so much. I appreciate it. This is...